So my answer to are men a problem is there is a problem, and it's been caused by some men. But men are the solution. All men are the only solution. The only obstacle between the man you are and the man you want to be is the man you had to become. This comes from personal experience, and this comes from 20 years of watching men work on themselves and look at what's held them back in their lives and look at what they need to reclaim to move forward with their lives. In a way, it's Jungian psychology just in a simple line. It's like, here we are, and we're growing. We're this child, and we're growing to be this person. And our trajectory should kind of be like that, right? But life's traumatic. When we talk about trauma, it isn't just like the trauma of, abuse or addiction or violence against you. Everyone's lives, we have traumatic experiences all the way through our lives, because trauma is any experience where we didn't feel physically, emotionally, or mentally prepared to deal with it. So we go along our lives and we think the world works a certain way, and somehow this traumatic experience or experiences happen, and it proves to us that the world isn't that way. Right? Now, the brain can't cope with not knowing. It has to have what's called schemas. It has to have a plan that makes sense, a view of the world that makes sense. So in that split moment, and usually when we're quite young, 4, 6, 8, whatever, these traumas happen, and we have to create a new schema. We have to create a new model about ourselves and a new model about the world, which means it all makes sense. So we then change our behavior based on that schema, right? We then change who we are. We change how we think about the world. We change how we act about the world. We change how we behave to protect ourselves from ever feeling that trauma again. So we become someone to survive. And then when we get a bit older and we start reevaluating our world, and then we're looking at the person that we want to be, that can seem so far away from us because of the person we had to become. No one sets out in their life, contrary to what anyone fucking says, no one turns out in their life saying, guess what? I want to be a drug addict, right? Or guess what? I want to be a criminal. Or guess what? I want to be a perpetrator of domestic violence. Or guess what? I want to be a ruthless CEO who has loads of money but fucks over everyone he ever knows. Right? No one does that. No one thinks of that as their plan. Right? But we go out through life, and then something changes how we are about the world. If it's the addict, the trauma comes out, and somehow I'm just not good enough. Somehow I'm just filled with shame. Somehow no one's ever allowed to see me. Or the ruthless CEO, I'm on my own. No one in this world matters, right? They're the sort of lines that go through our minds. And when we learn those lessons, we toughen up. We adapt to fit this new world, which we didn't know existed before. And suddenly moving into that man we wanted to become is no longer possible. So we end up with the man we had to become rather than the man we chose to become. And unpicking that is really what people call the work. That's really when people say the work or men's personal development, whatever you want to call it, it's unpicking that bit that happened in the middle that changed how I see myself, how I see the world, which meant I create whole new beliefs, whole new habits, whole new actions which shape the rest of my life. And until I unpick them and rewire them, I'm gonna keep doing the same thing. Carl Jung explains it. Was it Jung? I think it was Jung who said, we spend so much of our lives bending ourselves into different shapes just to try and fit in, that one day we no longer know what shape we could have been. And that's basically the same as what I'm saying through the only obstacle between the man you could be and the man you are is the man you had to become. And I think it's important to think of it that way, because otherwise it can seem like a lot of it is our fault, and we often blame ourselves for for the decisions that we've made, when you track it back, we're just behaving in the only way that made sense to a 7, 8, 9-year-old child that was faced with what it was faced with. That was the only logical conclusion. And that was the only thing that child, without the physical ability, without the mental capacity, without the emotional capacity, that's the only thing that was the best it could come up with as a tool for survival. And it's important to look at it that way, because often it's easy to look back and go, oh, if I hadn't have done this, and if only if I had reacted another way, but you didn't. You did the best with what tools you had. And so the man you are today was probably the best with what you were armed with. But that doesn't mean it's the best that you can be. But it will take the work. I mean, it starts with evolution, really. I mean, in a way, that's where I have sort of problems with the idea of patriarchy on some levels, because it sort of makes it seem like somehow it was preordained, it was pre-planned, like a bunch of, nomadic hunter-gatherers got together and went, we can carve this shit up, so we run it for the next 10,000 years. I just don't believe it happened that way, So even from evolution, there was through the fact that men didn't carry the babies, right, means that men went out and they tended to do more of the work that was done outside of the home, right? So it was more of the visual work. So when we look at things being created, we tend to think of men from that period. And that meant, of course, men had more power. But the moment that really changes it all, it is when we stop being hunter-gatherers. That's the first wound. Because when we stop being hunter-gatherers, then there becomes, and we settle, then there becomes ownership. Then there becomes, we have to protect what's ours. And so power of strength and being able to protect property and maintain resources becomes much more important. And so we become a lot more insular in that way. I mean, and let's not make a sort of the hippie view of the hunter-gatherers was peaceful. The history shows us that pretty much when a large group of humans come across a large group of humans, one of them killed the other one. In fact, archaeology shows us that. So we stand on bloody ground anyway. We're a brutal animal anyway. But then that comes in, that amplifies that. And so we become much more about smaller tribal communities. There's less needing to trade going on. We become more self-sufficient in that way. And then empire comes from that. The idea of empire, our culture can take over that culture. So we have the empire, comes from that. That's how the patriarchy comes. But in terms of individual men's lives, the problem comes when the Industrial Revolution comes. Because what happens when the Industrial Revolution comes is the men then go away from their communities to work. Factories are built, and they go and they end up in factories and they do one part of the job. And the problem with that is twofold. The problem for the men is they're no longer connected to their community. They leave in the morning, they come home at night. They're not as connected to their families. Their families stop seeing them throughout the day. They leave in the morning, they come back, it's dark, they go to bed. If they're lucky, they get some time off on a Sunday in those days, right? They stop to see the contribution. Because before that, you would have been growing whatever you were growing, doing whatever you're doing, and you'd have seen it go straight out into your community. Come then, you're just working for money, and you're just seeing some other person get rich somewhere that you don't even know. So you lose contribution. The work becomes less challenging because you just do one little part. So before, where you were a tradesman, you were trying to solve problems all day, probably new problems for the first time. Suddenly you're just like, I don't even make the shoe. I just put the laces in. So it becomes less challenging. So there's a lack of challenge. And whereas in your community before, you would have had, say, harvest festival or whatever at the end of the big processes, you now just, if you're lucky, get a couple of pints after work on a Friday. There's no real sense of you being celebrated for what you've done in your contribution to the community. So men start to detach in that way. And that's very different to how it would have been. Because if I'd have detached before the Industrial Revolution, if me and you would have been in a small hunter-gatherer tribe or clan together, if I would have started to detach, you or one of the other men would soon have had to have come and got me and gone, yo, like, we're trying to get the wheat in. Right, so I don't care how you feel, you've got to come and you've got to get the wheat in. And then guess what? I'm out, and you know what it's like. You work with people, you enjoy working with people, right? It's always fun. So they'd be out, you'd be working together, it's hard work, but there'd be a sense of connection, right? You're messing around, probably slagging each other off. You don't like all of that men do. There's a sense of connection. Then we also get the sense of challenge. We've got to do this within this amount of time. We know we know when we're succeeding or not. So suddenly I'm connected, suddenly there's a challenge, great. Guess what? What I'm doing is contributing. I can see it. We're going to get the food and it's all going to be good. And then when we've done it at the end of the day, or the end of the week, the end of the month, the end of the season, wherever it was, guess what? Bang, we party now. We did that. We're fine for the rest of the year, right? So it was harder to detach in those days than it is now. You could turn up to work miserable, and many men do, every day of their life for fucking 40 years. No one would know. So that's one of the big problems. The next problem involving men is the sons. Because before the Industrial Revolution, chances are you would have followed the profession that your dad had. So you would, as soon as you were a useful pair of hands, probably like 9, 10, 11 years old, they'd have said, son, we're taking you away from mum, we're taking you away from the women, and you're coming to work with me. Metaphorically, you're now coming into the world of men, right? And what would have happened there is, first of all, he's kind of a little bit useless. He's just getting the tools and getting whatever. But he starts to learn and he starts to become competent at something. And so his self-esteem starts to go up. He starts to realize that he's contributing to the family in some way, that he's competent, that he can do it, and he's learning new stuff. And he's connected with dad. And so dad's teaching him about how to be a man. Dad's showing him how to be a man. And the other men around him are showing him how to. Come the Industrial Revolution, that changes, right? And dad goes off to a factory, and little Johnny is sent off to basically another fucking factory, right? He's sent off to a school to teach him to be a worker and teach him nothing about community, nothing about the world of men, nothing about how to navigate a real family life, nothing of how to navigate the world. Just turn up on time, look the same every day, and learn to follow orders. And so there's disconnect. There's a disconnect from dad, and there's a disconnect from being the human animal that we are, and try to fit into some other little box that can follow all these rules. And the result is what we've seen from the Industrial Revolution onwards. The result is men living isolated lives, men seeking power over rather than power with, becoming so insular they think it's them against the world. It's just about grabbing and getting what they can for them and theirs. Not spending time with family, not seeing community as an important part of family life, not seeing spiritual belief as part. I mean, I'm not religious, but wouldn't it be a better time if people had held their spiritual beliefs over the capitalist ideals of just buying more? I think it would be a better world, personally. So really the Industrial Revolution is the grey wound. And then depending on where you are in the world and depending on your background, you've got either war, if you're European, big wars, lots of them. And if you're not, slavery. That's a big wound. And all of those are really atrocities committed by men on men. And in the name of capitalism. and industrialization. So really the Industrial Revolution is the big cause of a lot of the problems where we see today, because we were no longer invested in each other. We needed to exploit each other. And that's a very different mindset. Well, the arena of men's personal development is at best its own worst enemy, and at worst, classist and elitist, really, and impenetrable for most men. And that's what I mean by its own worst enemy. It's either impenetrable to most men, or it's trying to keep most men out. Because if we actually believe that we have tools and everything to change the world, we have to have tools to improve the lives of men, we have to make it available to more men. And if you take a cursory glance at a lot of the men's personal development that's out there, it's either like a sort of sea of wizard's hats and prog rock kind of imagery of unicorns and waterfalls, which to 90% of the world's population, men, is unbearable to look at, because it's just so far away from what they're experiencing on a daily basis. Or it's a bunch of like bronzed, really good looking men, you know, doing things in nature with other good looking men. And again, that's not the reality for most men. It's an aspirational thing. I get it. But if you're there at your factory job, coming home, and you've got fucking bills that you can't look at, right? And no sense of where you want to go, and you flick online and you see that, man, it's like looking at a holiday in the Bahamas when all you can afford is a weekend at Skegness. And so it keeps those men out. And that's why I said at worst, it's classist and elitist, because maybe it is just like providing for like, right? Because working class men, I speak because I am one of them, the personal development part doesn't work as well, because we're more interested in building community. There's been some interesting things done when they watch working class kids play of all genders compared to middle class and upper class children. Middle class and upper class children tend to play games of leadership, where they play the army, they play whatever. Working class boys and girls tend to play family, and it's because they want home, they want stability, is what they want. And a lot of personal development stuff, it shows how you can be better for you, how you're going to get the things that you want. Working class men want to work together on something. We want more community, because we exist in an arena where you have to rely on your neighbour for survival. And that doesn't seem to be grasped. I mean, it's one of the reasons that I stay involved with the Mankind Project, because I think that is something that the Mankind Project does work really hard to address. It is working really hard at the moment to reach men of difference and to make itself more open and appealing to men from all backgrounds. I think it's realised some of the problems in men's personal development, and I'm proud to be playing a part of that. But that's what I think. It's just not a reality that most people can look at and go, yeah, that's for me. And if you've got those tools, you need to share them fucking tools, right? Because the world needs it. So dressing it up in a bunch of pseudo-intellectualism, or behind some expensive paywall, or behind a ludicrously expensive training that no one can get to, then you're not sharing the gold. You know, you're not sharing the gold. And we don't have the time anymore for men fucking around and not sharing the gold that they could share with other men that are going to help other men have better lives. We don't have the time. It's too urgent. We have to reach men en masse in some way and go, yo, like, wake up. Like, your life's miserable. Guess what? So is your neighbour's. Why don't you two get together and do something and make it fucking fun? Right? Because then if we're doing stuff, if we're feeling better, then we can start looking over there and making that better. Rather than everyone just getting into their phone and hoping that they'll find the connection, the challenge, the contribution, the celebration that they need in there. But you know what? You fucking ain't. Because it ain't in there. It's momentary. your phone down, go and knock on your neighbour's door and have a cup of coffee. Ask if he's okay, because you know what? If you look at the statistics, he probably ain't. He probably ain't. I saw a statistic the other day that said only 1 in 4 men claim to have a close friend in America. I mean, that's just madness. There's 3 men of every 4. It might be even higher than that, but it means that like a vast majority of men don't have someone to phone up and say, how you doing? I mean, that's heartbreaking. They don't have someone to go out, yo, do you know what? Work was shit today. What's that like? And if you're saying, like I'm really into personal development and I'm building community and I want to make the world a better place, and you ain't going to see if the guys on your road need a chat, fucking liar at best, man, or you're delusional. Like it's got to the stage where it has to get real, and it has to be done on a local level, not an individual level. Yes, if it's to be, it starts with me, but very soon it has to become we. Right? Otherwise, I'm just staring at my navel. Really, I've got to get together, get myself in a good state, and get together with other men and start saying, "Yo, let's raise our standards here and make this world better for everyone." Because we've got some skills between us. You know, there's that comedian, I forget his name, Joey someone, he talks about, give me 3 motherfuckers and I'll take over the world, take over a country. You know, like, imagine if you had 100 motherfuckers in your area, all committed to doing good, all committed to making that area, your local area, your real area, not out there somewhere, your bricks and mortar around you, you know, to get 100 men in a square mile and go, let's get together and make this square mile the best it can be. What could those men achieve? Just in real terms, day to day, fucking fixing stuff, which men love doing together, right? Solving problems, working stuff out, volunteering here. That's development. That's real personal development, because it has service. The rest of it is just, oh yeah, I've read another book and now I understand my trauma better. Well, great for you. And so what? What are you going to do with it now? Get the fuck out and make the world a better place. And then guess what? Your self-esteem will go up. You will have a community around you. You will start to be celebrated in that community. You will be considered a role model in that community, and you'll start taking some pride in that. And suddenly your life is unimaginably better. But it has to come with action. Otherwise it's bullshit. It has to come with service, or it's bullshit. It's just another book. It's just another idea. And guess what? When you die, all those thoughts and ideas go with you. If you've not made a tangible difference to the world, you've not changed anything. You may as well have been wanking all day. Are men the problem? Well, when someone says something like men are the problem, that's really a shortcut to thinking, right? There's no real thought gone behind something like that. Because you only have to have a cursory look at not only the history, but the current social climate to see that men are not the problem. Some men are the problem. There's a small percentage of men who call the shots, right? And they're invested in keeping it that small percentage. And one way of doing that is by making men believe they have power over. And that encourages bad behavior in men. Again, capitalism's the problem, right? I mean, I don't want to sound like some sort of mad socialist, but like we have, where there is not an equal distribution of resources, you're going to have a scrambling for resources. That's what happens. Everyone scrambles over what's left. And when you have that, of course, you get power and dominance, and, you know, that's what we see. That's what history shows us. So my answer to are men a problem is there is a problem, and it's been caused by some men. But men are the solution. All men are the only solution, right? And this feeds into your second question about, like, should it be the there's a sort of stepping back and a kind of weakening of some men in some areas. And then there's this sort of hyper masculine side that's coming up and being like, no, we need to go back to just, we could have as many wives as we like. And it's all about driving Bugattis and it's all about money. And the truth is, it's neither of those, right? Because that's trying to answer the problem in a wrong way, right? And by asking a question like, are men the problem? It's a very binary answer you can have. You can only say yes or no, right? And if you say no, you go, right, that's it, we want more strong men. And if you say yes, you go, yeah, we're going to step back. Where it's better to pose it in a way of going, can men be the solution? Because if they are, that creates opportunity in that mindset. That creates that's a growth mindset. And that's how I'd rather look at it. The whole talk around, is there a crisis in masculinity? Like, no, there's an opportunity for men. Because men it ain't been that great for us either. Contrary to all the bullshit you want to hear about, like how men have had it great for the last, like, fucking 2,000 years. Again, that's a shortcut from thinking. Have a look at history. You'll see that's not the case. Talk to the guys in Wales who their forefathers crawled like 4 miles in a tunnel, unpaid, just to get to work before they even started. That weren't a privilege. Talk to the countless generations of men who have been sent to die for countries where they can't even afford to buy houses in. Right? That wasn't a privilege for them. That's fucked up. And that's happening right now. That's going to be happening in Israel soon. It's happening in Ukraine. Right? Still men being told, you've got to stay and you've got to die. Right? What's that about? What's that about? Do you know what I mean? For a country you don't even own. You didn't even make the political decisions over it. So it hasn't been great for men. But there's a chance it could be great for everyone. Because men are a really, really, really valuable resource. We bring a lot to the game. Right? History shows what good men are capable of. So rather than going, let's demonize men and back them out of the picture, let's create a space where we encourage men to be the very best that they can be for themselves, for their families, for the community, for the planet. And then you'll see a world. If you see a world of strong, like-minded, courageous, caring men who are interested in the betterment of the world and the betterment of their communities and in being better allies and in building power with rather than power over, you're going to build an impressive community. You're going to build an impressive world. And it takes two. It takes men, it takes women to do that together. But men backing out, men playing small, that ain't going to solve a problem. That's going to create a problem. How did my childhood play a role in my mission today? I was defined by it, really. I think as long back as I can think, I've been interested in masculinity, been interested in the world of men. And that comes from my background. It comes from growing up, 1, working class in East London, and 2, son of a criminal. That criminal world, power, microaggressions, hierarchy, that's what it's all about. It's all a race to get to the top because the bottom's so dangerous. So very early on, I learned the subtleties of men. I learned when a joke is beyond a joke. I learned when a diss is a diss. I learned the games that men play really well, games of popularity and power. And I also learned very quickly what an exhausting and damaging world that is. So one way or another, I've kind of always been involved in men's work, in being able to read men, being able to find my safety amongst men. I came to it for all the wrong reasons on one level. Yeah, there was a part of me on one level that I'd been invited to go by my boss to go on a weekend called the NWTA. And at that time, I was using a lot, I was drinking a lot, I was going off the rails, and he'd noticed this and suggested I go off onto this weekend. And now part of me kind of thought, the sort of Machiavellian part of me was like, you know what, let's go on this weekend. looks a bit culty, but handy to be in a cult with your boss, especially if things ain't going so well. Right? So I went for all the wrong reasons on one level, but actually under that, I was going for all the right reasons. I was exhausted by the world of men and the games that men play by this stage. I've been trying to be the top boy for as long as I could remember, and not through a place of trying to get significance, but a place of like the bottom of that world is very dangerous, and it's a very hard place to be. So you need to be at the top of the pecking order when you're living like that. And so I went to it because of that. I went to it half thinking it was for this reason, but subconsciously I was desperate to find a different way of being a man. And so that's really how I got into it. I went into my first NWTA, which is the New Warrior Training Adventure. It's a mad experience and really showed me new models of masculinity, which is why I work with them still today. That was 21 years ago. So the reason that I say that my mission is to help men is because I think that's the shortcut to solving a lot of the world's problems. I think if we can build better men, if we can build a place where men feel empowered, men feel proud of their role as providers, as supporters, as allies, as role models in their community, we undo a lot of the damage. We undo a lot of the damage, not just to men, which if we start looking at the population of prisons, if we start looking at the homeless population, if we start looking at drug addiction, if we start looking at crime, if we start looking at perpetrators, it's a large percentage of men. So men are suffering one way or another. But also, in healing the damage that they do to themselves, we heal the damage they do to others. Again, perpetration of crime, perpetration of violence, perpetration of all various different things, wars, all of these things are perpetrated by men, one way or another. And so it's a shortcut. Healthier men means a healthier world, one way or another. And more disenfranchised men, more men giving up their power, more men with less sovereignty, it's just going to fuck things up more. We ain't going to create a better world if men step back. We're going to create a worse world. You only have to look at the statistics to see that. Where there is not positive male role models, there is fucking trouble. And that's a fact. And it's one that not many people like talking about, but it's a fact. It's not what I think. It's not what I make up. It's what the data shows. You want to improve a situation, a healthy, responsible man, probably the best thing you can bring to that situation. Bell Hooks wrote a brilliant book called The Will to Change. And in that book, she talks about the damage that has been done to men, right? And whether you call it, some people call it the patriarchy. I don't think it's the patriarchy. I think it's late capitalism, I think is what it is. I think there's a system of capitalism that has made it beneficial for a small group of men to keep the rest of the men dominant over the female population. And in doing so, that middle tier, that tier of men who are not in the 1%, are encouraged to live really shallow lives. Lives without connection, lives without community, lives without challenge, lives without celebration. And the help looks like bringing that together. The help looks like helping men first through themselves to be able to connect with themselves, to feel okay with challenging themselves, to be able to feel that they contribute and to be able to celebrate themselves first. Once they've done that, then it's easier for us to go out into our family and do the same. Let's really connect with my family. Let's challenge my family to be the best they can be. Let's make sure I'm contributing to my family and I'm allowing them to contribute to me. And let's make sure I'm taking time to celebrate those closest to me, my loved ones. From there, we move on. Only then can we then move on to our communities and start to look around and start to connect with our communities and show up there as a role model. challenge them, challenge the communities within to be better, to raise their standards, to be stronger allies to others, to contribute more. It's real. Each one teach one. Share your skills. Do what you can to build a community. Make sure your neighbour's okay. And then celebrate together. Take time to go, this is great, isn't it, what we're doing? And from there, let's bring those communities together to make a better world for everyone in the same way. A world where we're connected to each other, a world where we challenge each other, a world where we contribute to the lives of one another, and a world where we celebrate each other. And that's what help looks like. It's by grabbing the men and going, you are not alone in this. Contrary to what you've been told, you don't have to do it all on your own. Contrary to what you've been told, you're not in competition with every other man around you. Contrary to what you're told, there is strength in community, not weakness in community. Needing others does not mean you are weak. Needing others means you are strong, because when you take from others, it means you're giving them permission to take from you. And being responsible for the world you live in, for the planet, does not mean you're some sort of radical idealist. It means you care about the generations to come. It means you're taking one of the only responsibilities we actually have as humans, which is to clean up the past and prepare for the future. And we've come to a system through industrialization, through capitalism, where they're trying to stop us from thinking that. They're trying to make us think the opposite, that we're alone, that we have to do it all on our own, because we're too powerful together. My passion at the moment is building a completely new model of men's personal development that can be done en masse, right? And can be done en masse because it's built on a basic principle of community, of each one teaching one. So taking elements from like AA and NA, where you have a simple program, a simple book, which you can take yourself through, or you can ask a more experienced man to take you through. But there's no need for expensive facilitators, for expensive programs, for expensive things. It's all run on donation, where small groups can be created around it to help men support each other in these groups and on that journey. And they don't just become groups based on getting together and making our feel better. It takes a leaf from like the Scouts, really, where we come together and we actively engage in our community and make our communities better. So we're actually doing what we're talking about. And so I want to bring 20 years experience in men's personal development, which I know works. Each one teach one, building communities, supporting each other in service, and every man sharing the gold he has with the world and giving it away. Like it's not some sort of, we don't have time for some sort of pyramid Ponzi scheme where people are trying to make money out of it. Like, we can't do that. We have to just get really simple tools that work and share them wherever and whenever we can with whoever we can, and encourage them to embrace them into their lives and encourage them to move from self to service. It's the only solution that can be done with the urgency in which it's needed. A few men at a time getting together doesn't work. We need to reach thousands at a time. Then I think that's my life's work.
I'm focused. I've been watching for the omens. I've been listening to everything you said. It's been running through my head, locked and loaded. I got the feeling that you know it. Yeah, I've only just begun. I won't stop until it's done.